Hello, my name is Les Moir. I'm here with More Than a Song. And today I have a good friend with me, Noel Robinson.
Hey, it's great to be here, Les.
You made all the way down from London.
I know, I made it from the sunny part to the even more sunnier part. It's great, and I love More Than a Song. That's like your name. Like, so good, Les. It's great, man.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about all the times you used to come to Eastbourne to play on the sessions.
Oh my God, you invited me to do those early sessions, and I'd have to come down and do an album in a day at ICC. Those were like real great days, you know. Really.
And I was also thinking about the first time that we met.
Yeah.
So I came to an awards evening.
Yeah. No, it was a concert.
Was it a concert?
Yep. Tremaine Hawkins.
Wow. Yep. And you were playing guitar for
Tremaine, yeah, that's where we met. I remember you because basically there was maybe about, I don't know, 400 or 500 people in the room, and you were the only white guy. So it was like, who's that white guy? But no, it's amazing season.
Yeah, how long ago was that? I was thinking.
I would say that's like 30 plus years, 30 plus years. So we've been going a long time, and you know.
So what happened was I was musical director for Graham Kendrick at the time. And I was looking for a guitar player that would fit in the team. And when I heard Noel play with Tremaine, it was like, yeah, I think this is the man. I think this is the guy. And so I hung around afterwards, and then we chatted on the stairs of Acton Town Hall.
Acton Town Hall, that's it.
So, and then
I remember it.
I remember it very clearly, Noel, and invited you into that. And you were going through. You had another offer?
I did, yeah. The most incredible thing, because at that time, after doing Tremaine, I had an offer from a really well-known artist to actually go and do a promo tour with them, and you know the management company were like, no, we really want you to do it. We really want you to be on that. And I was really excited because I was like, yeah, this is my opportunity to really step into the mainstream session world and do something big. And I have a moment with God that actually I'll never ever forget, because it was a moment where God says no. And how he said no was really interesting, because my dad didn't know anything about what was going on, and I had a vision, and in this vision God says, no, I've called you for the house. And I was like, he called me for the house? That doesn't make sense. I'm playing in the house, you know, I'm already doing it. And then my dad uses the same words in an open conversation. I'm thinking, what's going on? And then it was maybe a week after, even I said no, and it may have been about 2 weeks after, because I was really upset about saying no. And I got a recall from you going, hey, there's this guy called, you know, Graham Kendrick. Do you want to go on a tour called Pray for Revival? Which probably explains why I'm a revivalist, because at my inception of the worship, into the worship world, it's this that I'm confronted with, this tour of the United Kingdom in the shape of a cross. And we've gone from city to city, from the top of England right down to the bottom. And so for me,
and even to Scotland,
because I have this encounter in Scotland that really solidifies the calling of God on my life for what I do, because there's a gifting of God that you're able to do something, but it's a calling that you follow. So you have been like at the very beginning of what I call my ministry. Maybe not musical, but you know, because I've been playing since I was 5, but most certainly from what I know as a ministry, that I actually went, I surrendered to this, I'm going to do this. And you know, that whole journey you've been a part of. So
it's been a joy. And also our time with Graham Kendrick, that was like a really incredible time, wasn't it? We had an amazing team.
A very multicultural team. I'm sure Graham was upset with you. I heard somebody say that every time Graham turned around, another member of the team became not white. And I was like, yeah, it was Portuguese. We had everything in there. Do you know what I mean? You know,
Graham was very trusting.
He was.
And but it was. I felt that we modelled something.
Yeah, totally.
We modelled something, you know, on the platform. And also the sound, you know, we recorded a couple of albums, didn't we?
Yeah.
And King of the Nations, Crown Him, you know, where it really was a multicultural
band,
sound and band. And
it was the freedom that I think that, you know, not only were you bringing people into a picture, but the freedom that you allowed us to express our own musical ability.
Yes.
So as a producer, one of the things that I really love about when you produce, you kind of go, oh, what would you bring to the table?
Yes.
You're not one of those producers that go, well, play this, play this, play this, play this, play this. You kind of go, what would you bring to the sound? And I think that you were also stepping into a new sound as well. And I think that you allowed myself and a few of the other guys, you know, Steve Thompson, to actually breathe, be a part of the breath of Graham's musical expression to some amazing songs.
Yeah, no, it was, I just remember it, you know, every member of that team was almost like handpicked.
Yeah, totally.
Handpicked and brought in, and I'm so proud of everyone in that team that's really gone on. Everyone has gone on to be an amazing champion, haven't they?
Absolutely. You know, I remember doing the worship conferences, the renewal worship conferences, and inviting Graham to it. And our first one, we had like, you know, 800 people show up. And Graham's in the room, and I go over to him and I turned to Graham and I said, this is what you planted. And he just looked at me and he goes, and I went, no, this is what you planted.
Yeah.
Because, you know, oftentimes, you know, you don't know the lives that you touch or how you touch them. But I call Graham a real, and yourself, just real friends, in that we've gone through the worst of times in our personal lives. We've gone through the worst of times, ministry or whatever, but yet still we remain, and we see the calling on each other's lives. Yes. and we stir that, and that's what I love. You brought me into an introduction to worship ministry that was at the top of the food chain, I call it. You know, it was like, I mean, Graham was, you know, we'd been to Africa with him, we had been to America with him, and we'd travelled all over Europe with Graham. And for me, you know, I'm always deeply honoured to be introduced to ministry on that level. You know, it's like I jumped from the bottom to the top.
No, you were well deserved to be there, and because there was something even deeper, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Something deeper going on, and you know, there was a man at the time also called Philip Morbier.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he was a real general in the church.
Yeah.
And he had an amazing quote, and I wanted to read this. He said, from his book Building Bridges, he says he offered a prophetic challenge. He says, like the mustard seed in the parable, the black churches have grown into a significant force of evangelical Christians with a spontaneity, vibrancy, and dynamism that the white constituency needs. Imagine what power for good we could be in the hand of God if both communities could combine their resources and provide a prophetic witness to a nation that is in desperate need.
Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah, it's really powerful. But that's what I felt we were doing. We were like a prophetic witness.
Absolutely.
You know, to the church and to the people that heard the worship. But you know, what we've been talking about in this whole series is songs from the soil.
Yeah.
So back in the day, the soil was, I would say, very white.
Yep, totally. Yeah.
So in June 1948, the boat Windrush arrived.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And went into Tilbury docks. Hundreds of Caribbeans arrived, hopeful, dreaming of what this could be. And then what happened really was that the soil started to change.
Yeah.
The soil, which we know as the church, or even the nation, the society, started to change. So when that changes, the soil changes, then the sound has to change.
Absolutely, yeah.
The songs.
Yeah, I think one of the things, you know, Philip's statement is both an actual, but also a very prophetic statement when he made that statement. And he was, you know, one of the forerunners of what we call, I call a move within the black church to actually really establish true links and relationship with the white churches around, you know, and we saw that in his life, and we saw that, you know, through all that he did. But not only was he doing that, you know, your program's called More Than a Song, and that was the prophetic word of a man that actually lived it. But not only just lived it, but it was also about strengthening the actual black community,
yes,
and bringing them together. You know, he was the former ACEA, African Caribbean Evangelical Alliance leader, and I felt that was something very profound,
yes,
in actually bringing together the black denominations, which in themselves were separated by whether theology or where people were from. So the soil began to change, and we began to hear, and we use the word soil. I think I love that word because it speaks about the experience. What is the experience of those people? And I found that, you know, it changed. And in your book, just before that section, you actually talk about Andre Crouch.
Yes.
Because I always tell the story that I didn't grow up on gospel music, or let's say black American gospel music. That's not what I grew up on. I actually grew up on country and rock and pop.
There you go.
You know, I was listening to the likes of the Eric Claptons and the Santanas, and because I'm a guitarist, and those are the things that really used to push. And I had no idea about Motown really, but it was the Windrush children.
Yes.
Trying to find their identity. This is part of the soil changing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Trying to find their identity. They didn't want to sing the songs of their parents. We didn't want to do that because it was like, oh, parents are like, nah, that's. It's funny how every generation does that. I don't want to sing the songs my parents sing, but we had to find something that looked like us.
Yes.
And Black America did. Hence the influence of the Black American sound in our voice.
Yeah.
And we started to put that into all the things we did.
Yeah, but I remember, you know, probably early 80s, you know, meeting with, you know, Basil Mead, Joe Edwards,
Canis,
all those guys, and really, but just trying to encourage them to write their own songs.
Yeah, totally.
Then I see you and Mark Beswick, Howard Francis, those guys started to write.
Yeah.
Started to find your voice.
Absolutely, and there's songs that are birthed out of our experience here and the freedom that we, you know, that period of time was like, you know, we were coming of age.
Yeah.
You know, the whole community, our community, the black community was coming of age, and we desired not just to emulate what we saw on the records that we imported in, but for me in particular, I wanted to emulate Graham.
Amazing.
Because I felt that sometimes you can look at a role model that's far away that you actually never really touch. I mean, I was blessed to play for Tremaine, Richard Smallwood, Fred Hammond at the Winans, and you know, they'd come over and I'd be the guitarist on stage playing, but they were still far.
Yeah.
And I felt the significant thing for me about the soil was I wanted to meet someone that was actually writing songs from the soul. And here was GK with March for Jesus.
Yeah.
And these songs being birthed. And I was so inspired by that I began to write my own songs. You know, they sounded different from GK's, but
a few more chords.
Yeah, a few more chords. Yeah, like, I don't think that chord works. And I go, it can work there if everybody plays it. But you know, but that's the liberty, like you as one of our mentors, so to speak, that you allowed us to be what we could become.
Yeah.
And not shape it in such a way that goes, well, you can't be that, you have to be this.
Yeah. But as the church becomes more multicultural, as the church becomes more multicultural, then so the sound and the songs need to be also. And so one thing that we've been quite intentional about now, which is this cross-cultural collaborations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you know, where it's not just like a gospel version of a white song or white version of a gospel. You know what I mean? It's really like from the root. You know, it's you know, collaboration. You know,
I think that so for me that was really, really important. And from an early recording context, you know, I was collaborating with the guys around me, that first album, and then the second album, again collaborated with the guys around me. But on that third album, you know, having the likes of Matt Redman, Cannoli and various other people, being a part of that was something really special, because you could hear the songs came out differently, and the truth is that you could hear my language changing. Because my experience had began to change.
Yeah.
You know, the audiences that were wanting to experience what I do were white. You know, it was like I'd walk into a building like it's just us guys on stage that are black. You know, but yet still people will be still moved by the songs and the expression.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you start to really see the soil being reseeded. That's the word, I think, reseeded, where God was allowing us to now spring forth from the UK soil with our own sound. Yeah.
And obviously you're in London.
Yeah.
So there's a whole thing going on, Asian.
Oh yeah, churches. Yeah.
And then Brazil. We went to a Brazilian church.
Absolutely,
2 years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, I was there last year.
It was just loud. But it was amazing, wasn't it? So, and then, you know, when we did the UK blessing, we were able to bring in
everybody,
everyone together.
I mean, the profundity of, you know, talking about the soil and this statement by Philip Marbeer, we're still walking through it.
Yes.
But it's not where it was before. You know, the likes of the festivals around the UK and many of the events around the UK where it's your churches, actually many of the churches in the UK where you'll see people, black folks, being involved in the worship and being very intrinsic in it, and not just like a face, you know.
Yes.
We want to just model it, but actually being intrinsic in making those decisions and actually helping to shape that sound. You know, I think I'm incredibly blessed to be able to see the fruition of some of that stuff. I mean, you probably like even more blessed than I am, because, you know, there was you walking with the likes of me and Mark Beswick and not knowing where we would end up, and writing songs that the church sings right across board. And you know, I always say that you probably got an amazing snapshot view of just seeing the development of all of it that I think, wow, and in your lifetime or in our lifetime, just seeing the incredible changes and seeing a generation coming up that didn't have the battles that I had. Do you know what I mean? You know, and the battles that I had to actually be recognised or even noticed within the whole community. Yeah. But I'm thanking God that I'm seeing a new generation spring up, and it's like, hey, this is what we do. And maybe our culture, the soil has changed.
Yeah. And one other thing was the African church.
The growth, in the 90s.
The African church is now the fastest growing church in Britain.
Yeah.
And so how can we reflect that in our songs? Obviously, Waymakers Come, but there's many more, isn't there?
There's many more songs, many more Nigerian artists. I mean, my concern would always be about the British Nigerians. And you know, me working with so many of them, you know, Aaron T. Aaron and, you know, Moiwa, and the many guys that are here in the UK that have helped to shape that soil, and the records that they've brought out, and the songs being sung in churches, and people engaging in the theology and, you know, the heart of the songs. And I think seeing that grow, because obviously I got to see that firsthand, sort of like my family from the Caribbean. And, you know, when I brought out my first album, O Taste and See, it was like 94 or 95.
I remember.
And nobody had really brought out a worship album. We've had music albums, you know, the bands like, you know, Canis and LCGC and various people who have recorded, but here I was going, no, this is actually a worship album, and all the songs are about, we can use them in our local church, not as performance pieces, but as gathering pieces. So just seeing that, now we're seeing so many young worship leaders coming up. You know, we've got, you know, like Called Out Music, you know, he's HTB and Junior Gar, and so many of those guys who are part of the new sound of the soil.
Yeah.
And how we need to fan that. We need to fan that, because in 5 years' time, we may see incredible movement.
Yeah.
And you know, again, like, you know, you being my A&R, actually being my A&R from day dot, you know, and then seeing some of the songs that I've written being performed in other territories, you know, that song Rain, and how Leland grabbed a hold of that song and he's singing it around America, and T.D. Jake's been singing it, and I kind of think that the soil changed again.
Yes, and as confidence came.
Absolutely.
So from that journey of finding your voice, seeing the songs that you've written used in other nations as well.
Absolutely. Powerful,
yeah. And but no, just one last question. So what's the next step, do you think? What's the next step in terms of seeing this, I was going to say multicultural soil, the overflow of that? Well, what can you see coming?
I think that one of the things I said many years ago was that a whisper in England is a shout around the world. And one of the things I was alluding to was that the UK has been one of the predominant wells or soils that revival has really broken out. You know, we can talk about the Hebrides revivals, you know, the Welsh revival, even movement in Scotland, and throughout the whole of the UK, there are many different places, and in my time of worship, I've actually sought out those places because I felt that I am a part of the soil and I need to know what happened here.
Yes. And
having traveled around the country and seeing hearing the most incredible stories of a move of God, even in the last century, and I actually believe that we're on the cusp of a new move of God, but multiculturalism is going to play a great part in it, because the sound of the gospel from the UK went out across Africa, went out across Asia, went out across so many places. Most of the churches that you find around the world, they have some links to a revivalist who've answered the call of God. But I actually feel that many of those people, and those people like the Windrush, have come back in. Why? Because I know that, and I liken it to this, that every move of God has a time span, has a season. And we can see that in how denominations are formed and all the kind of stuff. But I actually believe where we are now, and this pandemic has really heightened it or hastened it, and not just the pandemic, but the world affairs have really heightened it. I believe that there is a supernatural move of God, and I think that the nations are going to carry it. I believe that the UK has an incredible heritage in carrying stuff, and I think the likes of the nations gathered, you know, the Brazilian, the Portuguese-speaking church that are alive in the UK, from Swindon right through to Manchester, right through to London. Then you've got the African churches in a different, and I call them African, but they're all different nations. But isn't there something about the nations gathered around an altar? You know, it's significant that the King James Bible, the English-speaking Bible, that was translated into English here, that carried the essence, that's actually right in the middle of our parliament, that people don't talk about, that God is bringing people together, because what's going to come forth is that we're going to hear songs of revival that may not sound like songs of old, because we're on a cusp of actually the church actually infiltrating the world. So we have artists like the likes of Jake Isaac, Martin Smith, and some of those guys who are cutting edge, whose sound and music is not necessarily conducive to church, but actually it's opening up a whole broader. And I think that this is the next level of revival, is an evangelism that we've never known before.
Amen.
I believe that men and women are going to come to know Christ in the most remarkable way. And I think that England is set to carry a revival into Europe. You know, so, you know, if I was speaking prophetically, the war in 1945 brought a picture to me that was revealed. But when I began to research it, on the beaches of Normandy were soldiers from every single free country. There were even Caribbean soldiers there.
Yeah, definitely.
There were African soldiers. There were soldiers from Australia, Asia. and they all stood on that beach and pushed back the darkness. There's a sense where they're gathered once again in this UK.
That's a beautiful
and prayer and worship is going up, and there is a pushback. There was a pushback against. Europe's not the enemy, but the darkness that has stopped revival.
Yeah, the nations were all there standing together.
And this is the power of this multicultural community that prays, this multicultural community that worships together, that becomes that united thing. They were in the upper room, one accord, and they had an encounter, and they began to speak in different languages, but more importantly, they were filled with the Spirit. And miracles and signs and wonders broke out. That is what we have the power to do when we all come together and we begin to champion the church of God and the things of God.
The whole church.
And this is what the journey has been, Les, since the 80s, what you've been doing, and how you've intentionally brought relationships together.
Yeah.
And that's why it's more than the music.
But I want to say that whenever there's a move of God, there's new music.
Absolutely.
And so the Lord just really bring the new music and the sound that really is going to impact the nation. Thanks, Noel.
Good chat. Great, really great being
chat
here, always.
Yeah, and just like to say, if you think it's of interest to anyone, please like, subscribe, and share with whoever you think would love to hear this. Thanks so much.